Morning, everybody. Want to welcome everyone to this morning's virtual session with Turnstile Tours. I'm Andrew Gustafson, and today we're going to be exploring more manufacturing at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So in just a minute, we're going to bring on Scott Jordan, who's going to give us a little tour of his factory. Just a couple things to note. If you want to turn on the closed captioning, we have Doug Chapman behind the scenes who's doing the captioning. So there's a button at the bottom of your screen so you can turn on the closed captioning. If you want to turn off the closed captioning, you can do that too. We had a question from someone, a couple people actually, about how to turn it off if it's on your phone. You'll actually have to exit the session on your phone and turn it off in your settings. And then you can come back on. So just a heads up for folks. I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we have coming up because tomorrow we're going to be going back to the Navy Yard again, where we're going to be interviewing Anastasia Kolplakias, who is the co-founder of the Brooklyn Grange rooftop farm. So she's going to be talking to us about her journey and the journey of the company in rooftop farming here in New York City. So that's on Thursday. On Friday is May Day. So Friday is the traditional Labor Day. So we're going to celebrate it the way it's meant to be celebrated, which is a day of rest. So we're going to take May 1st off, but follow us on Twitter and Facebook and our social media, because we're going to be posting a lot about the labor history of the different sites where we work. Then on Saturday and Sunday, we actually have two programs on both days. So on Saturday in the morning, we're going to have John Tebow, who's an artist and illustrator, and he's going to be showing off his book where he made these really loving drawings of some of his favorite bars in New York City. So he's going to be talking about that, but he also wants to invite people to come on and talk about your favorite places to gather, whether that's a bar or a restaurant or a park or some other real community space. So we're going to have a conversation, but also talk about his art and his process. We're also going to have on a food photographer named Clay Williams, who's going to be showing off his work. And we've worked with him for a long time because he's been the official photographer for the Vendy Awards. So that'll be super fun. And then on Sunday, Cindy is going to be talking to us about the history of street vending through art. So she's identified a bunch of really neat artworks from the 19th and early 20th century, and sort of the depiction of street vendors and the different work and the different items and foods that they sold through artwork. And then, we're going to have Clay on Sunday, but on Saturday, we're going to have Riverdale, which makes vegan cheese. So we're going to be going to the Essex market, and they're going to talk to us about their process. And they're really delicious cheeses that are all vegan, all non-dairy. So those are the things you have to look forward coming up. So you can visit our website at turnstyletours.com. And you can sign up for all the programs. And I know we have a lot of people on today who are regular viewers and are our All Access Pass subscribers. So we just want to thank you all so much for your support. So we're going to keep this going into the month of May, and we'll see what happens. Right now the quote unquote pause in New York City is set to expire on May 15th, but they said in parts of the state, in New York City in particular, it'll probably be extended beyond that. So that's kind of where we're at right now if you're not in New York City or New York State right now. So we are going to go to our guest, Scott Jordan. So Scott runs a furniture maker inside the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So I should just say who we have helping us out today. So I mentioned that we have Doug doing closed captioning. We also have Stefan who's on the chat. So he's going to be answering questions and feeding questions to me and Scott. So you can drop them in there. But then we also will be talking to Scott, but we also have his wife, Anya, who's behind the camera, who's going to be filming inside their showroom and their factory as we walk through this space. So we've known Scott for a long time. We do pretty regular tours as part of our Inside Industry Tour series at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, really showcasing not only the incredible work that they do, but their process. And so that's what Scott's going to walk us through and talk about, how the company has evolved over time and really adapted to a lot of changing technology while still maintaining a lot of those traditional skills and handcrafts as well. So I'm going to bring Scott on here. Just take 1 second to bring up his video. Hi, Scott. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Good. Well, welcome to our showroom here at in Building 280 at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And I'm standing in front of a wall unit that we produced in front of our shop, across the hall. And I'm going to give everybody today a little walkthrough on how we create these things and the whole process of making. We've been in business for 40 years, since 1980. We've been here at the Navy Yard since 1988. We were one of the first smaller tenants here. When we moved in 1988, the place was basically abandoned. And we've stayed here for more than 33 years now and producing wooden furniture. So what our specialty is wooden furniture, and that is solid wood is what we specialize in. And basically for residential use. We started with a much narrower line 40 years ago. And about 21 years ago, we got into computer-aided machinery. And this changed the whole paradigm of what we did and how we did it. Because prior to using computer-controlled machinery, we made batches of things because there are certain unit costs that were associated with multiples. So we would make 10 beds or 10 tables, et cetera, at a time, and did very little custom cabinet work. But when we got into computer-controlled machinery, that changed the paradigm because essentially, once you program the machinery, you can make one piece at a time at a very similar unit cost. So this allowed us to change the whole paradigm and to start making things like you see behind us, which is a wall unit. Now this wall unit can be completely custom configured. So in this case, we've shown different cabinets and whatnot in order to demonstrate it. The process starts with, Anya, of course, is not only the cameraman, but she's also the draftsman. And you can see here, this is how a similar job started. And here's Anya's drawing of, a proposal for a client. So we take this drawing and then from this, once we've decided on a configuration, for instance, and of course, any of this is configurable. So in this case, we've got a 35 or 40 or 48-inch section, but those numbers could be anything. And then similarly, this can be arranged in many, many different ways. And of course, we've made many, many different variations on this thing. This particular type of wall unit has been very popular because it's a construction type that we came up with that doesn't require a back. It will fit flat, flush against a wall, being cut up above the baseboard, so that there's a certain spareness to it that people have found to be, quite attractive. And in this case, we're showing different things here. For instance, this has got a sliding door on this side, and here we show another option for a door, which is a door with drawers, and of course, doors with glass, and of course, all sorts of different lighting options. So this piece here shows, and of course, this is shows a corner unit of, how to bend a corner with the whole thing. So this is an example of something that we make a lot of these sort of things, and they're configured for the client's space. Just to give you an idea around the showroom here, we'll show you some of the other pieces. Now, this is one of Anya's designs, and this is proved to be a very successful design, this credenza. And once again, we make that in all sorts of different configurations. This one shows here is, a set of drawers, and then a pair of doors, but we've made this in many different ways, with different drawer and door configurations, which because of our paradigm of computer-aided design and manufacturing, we can do one of a kind by making different size parts essentially. So we just
and so Scott, Could you
Yes.
tell us, like, using the old methods, why did you have to make things in bulk? Why was it harder to customize things?
Essentially because of setup time. So if you're using, let's say, conventional machinery like a table saw or the different, a shaper or all the different conventional machines, essentially what you do is you set up the machinery and then you make a cut or a process. And once you've set the machine up, it's a lot more efficient if you can continue to make multiple parts. And let's say 200 years ago, well, people made one piece of furniture at a time. Then with the Industrial Revolution and the creation of a lot of, let's call it, sophisticated woodworking machinery, but let's call it the old style, before computer controlled machinery. Lower unit cost was associated with large run size. So people would make batches of things because they would make, in the case we would do here, if we made 10 beds, well, we would make 40 bed rails. And it was all one setup. So one guy would set up to make bed rails and then would make 40. With computer-controlled machinery, that's not necessary. You can, the setup time, which you're going to see in a few minutes here, is usually very short. It's usually just putting machinery on the machining center, putting material on the machining center, and then calling a program. And we've developed all sorts of routines for creating paradigmatic programming, which is, it's essentially inputting a size. So for instance, let's take on a case like this where we make a drawer front. Well, we'll make a drawer front on the machine. The machine, basically, you put in, well, what's the height of the drawer and the width of the drawer, and it will make a drawer front. Similarly, for the bottom or for the rail here, the same thing. It's all different dimensions which are put it into the program that instructs the computer in order to make it. And it will make that particular part in whatever size was specified. So by doing that, now of course, a computer-aided machining center doesn't make a piece of furniture. What it makes is parts for furniture. And each one of those parts has a length, a width, and then other specifications for mortises and tenons, and etc. So by changing all these these parameters, you can create any one particular piece of furniture in a lot of different sizes and do it one piece at a time. A good example I'll point over here is a dresser. This is a very common dresser that we make. And obviously it's a vertical oriented dresser. Now this dresser, this particular one is about 38 inches wide, which is a common size. But if somebody wanted this dresser to be, let's say 39 inches or 37 inches, that would be a very easy thing to accomplish, because essentially what we do is make the top an inch longer, make each drawer accordingly a little bit wider, and so on, and each rail a little bit longer. And that's all specified within the program that we're using to make the parts. So therefore, we can make this piece, and then similarly, if they want it to be one drawer shorter, well, we change the parameters for the side, and so on. So we can make this essentially in any size. And then you can extend that across our whole line of furniture, with the one exception as being chairs. Chairs are a little bit more complicated because of the geometry involved. But on rectilinear furniture like this, it's quite easy for us to change the dimensions, essentially on the fly to the man.
So we're looking at all this beautiful wood. Could you tell us a little bit about the kind of wood that you use and where you get it from?
Okay, so we work really only with locally sourced hardwood, and which means, from a practical point of view, central Pennsylvania is our major supply. Most of what you see here is cherry. It's American black cherry, which is a native cherry wood, and native to Pennsylvania and to New York. So and the finishes on this, we don't stain any wood. We actually don't use any materials here which are harmful to the employees. And wood stains are actually highly carcinogenic for the people who apply them. And lacquer finishes are also the lacquer finish itself is actually very carcinogenic. So what we do here is just wood, solid wood, which is actually not toxic in any way. American black cherry has no toxicity to it. And it's just finished with natural oils and waxes, basically beeswax and linseed oil, and with no stains. So essentially this is black cherry. If we look around the showroom here, we can go over here. And another wood that we very commonly use and it's very popular right now, which is walnut. This is American walnut. And once again, it's naturally occurring in the East Coast. And then we also use maple, which is this little bench here is maple. And then behind us here, there's a piece which is in white oak, and that's also locally occurring. That's a white oak piece there. So there's a variety of wood. So it's basically cherry, walnut, white oak, red oak, maple, birch, and those are the woods we use. And they're all locally sourced.
So this is the showroom, and folks can make an appointment and come and visit your showroom. I mean, when things are back to normal, right?
Absolutely. We're here by appointment. And we have, you can see what we have here. We have another room next door where we have our beds on display. And because one of the things that we're quite, let's say, proficient at is bed frames. So we have a whole room full of those, which we can show at some later time. But obviously these things are visible on our website. Mm-hmm. We also sell natural mattresses, which are, let's call it chemical-free mattresses, which we don't make any longer, which when your visitors come over, I'd be happy to tell them the story of, let's say, mattress making in America, which is probably beyond the scope of today's. But we sell let's say a chemical-free mattress, that go with our bed frames.
Yeah. And so your showroom is right across the hall from your factory, right?
It is, and let's go over there now, and we'll sit at the design center, and I'll give an explanation of the process for what we do.
Great.
So some of the upholstery, just to mention, that you see through here. For instance, these are sofa beds that we sell. We don't make these, but these are made by a company in Dallas, Texas, American Leather, which, notwithstanding their name, make also fabric sofas. But they use a very similar process to what we use. That is, they make these sofa beds one at a time using computer-controlled machinery. And in fact, I got to know this company when I bought a computer-controlled machining center more than 20 years ago. They were using the same machine, and through the machinery company, I got to know them. When I understood what they're doing, I said I want to be a dealer because I understood they had solved a lot of the problems of the upholstery furniture business. At any rate,
let's go late 90s, right?
This was 1999.
Yep.
Okay. So at any rate, we're going to go across the hall, and we'll go into the office, and we'll show the process. This is the control for the machine. We'll come back here in a minute. And then we're going to actually make a couple parts on the thing just so people can see the machinery in operation. But before we do that, we're going to go into the design room. And okay. So here, one of we use two main pieces of software, two main programs of software. And one of them, the first one that I'm going to show you here is called SolidWorks. And you can see on the screen let's say, a virtual creation of, let's say, a part of a wall unit. And this is an actual job that we're working on right now. And you can see this is actually, the way this is done is that this is a construction of parts. So actually every part has been created virtually and then assembled. So for instance, here's this wall unit. And so we can take this case here, which is very similar. Now, there's some detail missing here. This is actually, and for this particular job, these will be file drawers. Now, for this purposes, we actually don't put, I don't put the drawer fronts in it because this is really just a shop, just for the workshop. That is we had a presentation to the client, we agreed on the dimensions, we took field measurements, and now we're creating this in order to actually make it. So it's not necessary for us to actually put the drawer in here, although of course we could do that. So just to show a little bit level of detail, so there's actually going to be two of these. There's two slightly similar ones, and these things go into a brownstone flanking a fireplace on the second floor of a brownstone in Park Slope. So this will show one of the units, and then now we're going to take just a part. Now this is the case that fits into that thing, and you can see the different parts. And I'm going to show now. It's getting warm. Okay. Well, it says the foam is getting warm. So at any rate, we're now going to open this part, and this is the part which we're going to make on the CNC machine in just a second. So now we've virtually created this part. Now it shows there's some holes here where it bolts into the side, and then these three things here that you can see here, these are mortises where that rail will fit in. One of the benefits of computer-controlled machinery is it's able to produce and machine a level of quality and repeatable quality, which is really like unmatched, because the machine, it doesn't really care how long it takes. If you had to make these little mortises by hand, this would take quite a bit of time, and this would be probably not practical using hand tools, or even, let's say, more traditional woodworking machinery. But because of the way we're doing it, we can actually do this level of detail and make a very strong K cabinet by the use of computer-controlled machinery. So at any rate, the process is we take this panel, which we created here in SolidWorks, and we'll save this as a vector-based format, an x.t file, and we import that into another piece of software called Mastercam. Mastercam is commonly used by, let's say people who own computer-controlled machinery. And what Mastercam can do, you can see now this is a pair of that same part shown in wireframe. And this will create the tool pathing necessary to make this. Now what I'm going to do is I've already set this up, and I'm going to now, let's say rehearse what the machine will do. So I've selected these operations, and then now I'm going to, let's say, what they call backplot it. And this will now show what the machine will do. So you can see now it's cutting out the part. It's showing a router bit, cutting apart. Okay. And then it's going to cut these three little mortises. Cuts the back, cuts the mortises there, and then it went around and it did something at each one of these points. Now, actually, it's a little bit more complicated than you can see here, but this will create, this software will create what's known as the G&M code. And that's commonly the tool, because you can see that most of these commands have a G or an M in it. And I don't know if you can see that, but this is the code which the machine can understand. And you can see it's all like G and M's. And, obviously this looks like just rows and rows of numbers, but like almost any computer program, the computer will execute this one line at a time. And I guess it's a little bit beyond what we're doing here today, but at any rate, the machine basically understands straight lines and sections of arcs. And so this software has broken down all the motion into straight lines and sections of arcs.
Now, Scott, could you tell us how you learned to do all this stuff and how you kind of got started first in woodworking and then, you know, being a computer programmer, basically?
Okay, well, it was a little bit backwards, but I studied computer programming back in the late 60s, early 70s when I was in college, and I was a Fortran and COBOL programmer, and then assembler, and I did that for about 6 years. So I had a background in mainframe programming, and then basically followed my dream, and I wanted to make furniture, and I started making furniture by hand in late 70s, and then I opened this business in early 1980, essentially doing it the old way, using, you know, a combination of hand tools and, you know, table saws and shapers and routers and what people are more familiar with in doing it. And I would go to woodworking shows and I would see these machines, and of course, but at that time in the, let's say the 1980s and the early 90s, these machines were very, very expensive. And then what happened with standardization of the machinery, the cost of computer-controlled machinery fell like a rock during the 1990s, such that by the 1999, I could afford a computer-controlled machining center, which we're going to go out there now and take a look at it.
And how did you learn woodworking? We had a question about that. So where did you kind of get your start in that? Were you self-taught, or?
You know, I grew up in a family where it wasn't strange to make things. So when I was a child, I was my father's helper in renovating a house, myself and my brothers. So it wasn't odd for, you know, the whole notion of making things wasn't odd. And then I just sort of, you know, essentially people do what they've seen done before. So I had seen people make things, you know, things out of wood, make furniture. I'd seen this done before. And so I knew it was possible. And so I started doing it. When I got out of school, I needed furniture for an apartment I had. So I went to the lumber yard, bought some lumber, and started making some furniture for myself. And basically just kept going with it. And then I started a business originally fixing furniture, which was a really good education, because in fixing furniture, you certainly find out what works and what doesn't work. So that was a good education. I did that for a couple of years. And then it sort of dawned on me easier just to make it. And so I started making, well, first, you know, the things that people buy, dining room tables and chairs, and then beds. And I sort of got lucky in that when I started making beds, that were just for a mattress, because this whole notion of a box spring, I didn't really believe it. I didn't think it was necessary. I thought it was just a marketing gimmick. And of course, it is just a marketing gimmick. And so I made beds that were just for a mattress. Well, it seemed that people understood this. So I had this product that I had a little shop on Atlantic Avenue, and I was making these things essentially in the basement. But people realized that this was a good product. And I made them in a way that was like a 19th century bed was made. That is, bolted together. So it was a very strong construction type. People would come in and say, well, don't I need a box spring? And I would say, no. And nobody ever disagreed with me, because, you know, in their heart, they realized that it was just kind of nonsense. And so I had this product, which none of the major furniture manufacturers made such a thing. So I made a lot of beds. And indeed, what prompted the purchase of this machine, now we'll take a look at what this is. This is a router. This is a 10 horsepower router. There's a bit inside here. And this router is controlled on three different axes by servo motors. Okay, so this now you're showing you what this is. You can see this is the router, and you're going to see this thing working in just a second. Along the back of the machine here are different tools that the router can pick up and use. Okay, so but let's get this thing started, and then now you can see it. You can see it working. So at any rate, to answer your question, in the 1990s, I had orders for more beds than I could make using the old process. and I realized that a computer-controlled machine. Now, I'd studied computer-aided design starting in the early 90s, because originally I did pen and paper, orthographic drawing. And I learned AutoCAD in order just to use a computer-aided version of orthographic drawing. And then we did it with AutoCAD actually for quite a few years until we discovered SolidWorks, and then started doing solid modeling, which is what we do today. So, but I understood how these machines worked. I understood programming. So once it got to the point where I could afford a machine, I bought one and started using it. And then we started developing different techniques for programming them, and started building out. We understood the whole process that, one at a time. And, so then as you develop programs, you can start building, let's call them variants on products, one piece at a time.
And you have a library now of these designs.
A big library, but also more importantly than a library is the technique to do it parametrically. That is by putting out, in this case, we're just going to make this thing from that program I saw. But there are other techniques, and what these are here, these are 2 cherry panels, and I'll just show you these things. Let me just get another one. This is a cherry panel, and this is, in this case, 2 cherry boards that are glued together. And people say, is that strong? Actually, the glue joint is the strongest part of this. If you think wood is wood, right? Well, wood is cellulose fibers that are held together with lignin. Lignin is the resin that exists in trees and is holding the fibers together. Well, the resin that we use to glue it is actually stronger than lignin in the wood. So the glue joint here is actually stronger than the wood. So at any rate, so this is a cherry panel. This is 2 cherry boards glued together, and it's been sanded now because it's obviously easier to sand this before you cut it. Because we have different machinery that we can use to sand this when it's flat. So these are cherry panels here that are on the machine. And then now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit here. If you come over here, we just take a look. You're going to see my bicycle wheel that I'm changing the tire on. But beyond that is 2 vacuum pumps. And the other machinery around it is the dust collector. But I just want to show you the vacuum pumps because that's how this whole thing works. So let's come back over this way. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn on these vacuum pumps.
So that's what the holes are for, right?
Huh?
That's what the holes are for.
Yeah. Right. So now these panels, these are down here. These are being held down by technically the 14 pounds per square inch weight of the atmosphere. Okay, but I guess a more practical way looking at it, the vacuum is holding these down on the table. Okay, so why vacuum? Well, the reason for vacuum is that in using this machine, you don't want to bump into any metal clamp. And if there were any metal clamp that were above it and this ran into it, well, it might do some damage to the router. The bits cost, minimum of $60, $70 up to a couple $100. So it would damage the machinery. So this way, if it hit something, it's just a piece of wood. It would cut through it, whatever. You throw it in the trash can and move on to the next thing. But it doesn't damage the machinery. So, and these now are held down. And of course, they're held down in a known location. And on this table, you can see there's different markings and whatnot. Now, just to show you how it's held down, I'm going to take is a fixture like this, and this is a vacuum fixture. And of course, these vacuum fixtures we've made on the machine itself. This is, we glue up scraps of wood and make wood blocks like this, and then machine them so that they fit into our system here. And then, of course, the corners of this become known locations. So, anyway, so now we've got this here. Now, I've already cut this panel out. Okay, So the next one we're going to do is this one here, because, you know, once again, this sort of gets a little boring just to watch this machine work. So I'm going to now turn the machine on.
So it's going to get a little loud, folks.
Yeah. So now I cut that one out. So what I'm going to do. So now we've made the side panels for that cabinet that we've shown, and this will get really drawers and fit in here. I just want to show this. Now, when we assemble this, you can see we have this part, and I made this before, and this is just a sample of a showing the tenons. And what will happen is that a rail, you see, will fit in here like this. And this will be a very, very strong piece of furniture, because you can see that it's basically these three what are called tenons fitting into three mortises, and with a little bit of glue, that's going to make for a very, very stiff cabinet. We'll actually dovetail this cabinet together on another piece of machinery, which is also a computer-controlled piece of machinery. So at any rate, let's walk now through the shop. So essentially, making the furniture is making a whole series of parts, all on the CNC machine for the most part.
And what we were seeing there, Scott, just so we understand, because it was a little loud. And folks, I know it sounded a little weird, but Zoom does a good job of compressing that really loud sound. So it sounded kind of digital on our side. But what we saw doing was swapping out different tools, right? For different cuts.
Exactly. So there are different size tools which are more efficient for different types of cuts. And then, of course, just to show you here, for instance, this is for the edge of a shelf, but then there are specialized shape cutters like this, and then further operations, this is a horizontal tool, which can, of course, swivel and be programmed, and this can cut in this direction, and so on. So in this case, there's a whole variety of tools that are on the machine, but then we have more. If you take a look behind the machine here, there's other tools back here, which, you know, we can put in positions as needed. And these do all sorts of different things. So there's all sorts of different type of machining. And this is just the very tip of the iceberg of what is possible with a CNC machine.
And so that's another huge part of the, you know, your time saving and setup is that the machine is swapping out all the tools, or you'd have to do all that manually.
Exactly. That's right. Essentially what I showed you there, once you've started this process, I don't really even need to stand here. In fact, normally we don't. Myself and another guy who operate this machine, once we've started a process, we basically go on and do something else. And with some experience, just from listening to the sound of the cutting, and of course knowing what part you're making, we know what the machine's doing, and we know when it's about to end. We've actually set it up so that when a part ends, a bell goes off and it says, come over and do the next part.
And speaking of doing other things around the shop, Barbara asks, how many people work in the shop under normal circumstances?
Well, in the shop, 6 people under normal. So obviously there's nobody here today but myself. But and I go, we can walk through and you know, show you. And let's walk through and I'll show you some of the machinery and tell you what it does. Okay? So here are parts just in front of me here. These are parts, and these are all drawer parts for this particular job we're doing. Just to show you here, this is that job that we saw on the computer screen. And we with the job, of course, we keep a drawing so the people who are assembling it know exactly what it is that we're making. Now, of course, we do a lot of these things over and over, so they know, but it has the dimensions and has the parts, so it shows what it is. And then you can see these parts are already been cut. These are the sides to the cabinet, and this has all been cut and drilled. And this is, of course, done on the CNC machine. Here are shelves that will fit in it, and this edge was done with that tool, which I just showed. You see there's a beveled edge here, which is done with the tool, and so on. So these, and so what it is, what's happening here, these have been machined, and this area here that shows in here is all sanding. So the next step in the process is to sand the parts. And there's different sanding machinery here. Here, this table here is the downdraft table where we'll sand, let's call it the final sanding stages. And what this is, this machine, I'll just turn it on. The dust goes down through the table and into filters. So the idea is that you want to collect the dust at the source, okay? Similarly, this machine is set up with a dust collector and so on. So this is the sanding area. So what the process is to machine the parts. Actually, for panels, we actually sand them first, and I'll show you how we do that. So over here, this is what's known as a wide belt sander, and that conveyor belt is sanding belts inside of that, which you can feed the pieces through, and it will sand flat panels. So that's how that's done. This is a set of clamps here, and this is for gluing up, boards into panels. And of course, turn around here, this is a straight line rip saw, and this saw will create a very straight edge on a board in order to be able to glue two together. It will be absolutely straight. And then, of course, there's sort of, let's call it more traditional woodworking machinery. A table saw would use a little bit, and there's a planer, there's a jointer there. But, for instance, this is, people think that a jointer is how to join boards together, and it kind of is, but a straight line rip saw does a much better job of So, and then dust collecting machinery, there's back behind those panels there, there's more dust collecting machinery.
So we had another question, Scott, which was, do you ship nationwide?
Oh yeah, we can ship anywhere. Now here, this is a secondary. This here is a secondary machine. This machine here, OMEC, this is a programmable dovetailing machine. And what this machine we use for, you can see here, I don't know if you can see this, but you can see the dovetails in these two pieces of wood. So we use this machine for making the cases. The pieces that we just machined on the CNC machine, we'll bring them over here and we'll actually dovetail that case together like this. And similarly, we'll make the drawers using this machine. That is, we cut them to size and then we use this machine in order to dovetail, which makes for a very strong box of many different types. It could be a drawer box or it could be the case for a cabinet. So this is a secondary machine that is sort of very important to our operation.
Speaking of all your dust collection, Barbara asked what happens to all that sawdust?
Okay, so we bring it to the Lower East Side Ecology Center, which is right under the Manhattan Bridge. And they mix it, they like it because it's just cellulose. It doesn't have, you know, it's not dust from like MDF, you know, medium density fiberboard. So it doesn't have any formaldehyde. It really is just cellulose. So it actually gets mixed with the refuse from the 14th Street Green Market. And of course, you know, compost is carbon and nitrogen, so green and brown. So this is the brown that gets mixed with the green from the 14th Street Green Market.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. And Lee asks, how many square feet is your space?
I think it's between this and across the hall, I think it's 1,100 to 1,150. So let's just go next door into the finishing area, because what you see here is the assembly area where we do machinery. These two benches here are where we're doing assembly. But as you can see, we haven't been working here since middle of March. So, you know, hopefully, like I said, as soon as we can get back to work, there'll be people working in there. So in here, this is our room that we just use for finishing. And there's a table here, which is, you know, practically done. I think it just needs the hardware put on. And this has been sitting here since the middle of March. But that's practically done. This is walnut. This is a dining room table. And it's an extension table with self-storing knees. It's in the process. Right there. So that's going to be ready to go. And then you can see sitting here are, these are actually bed parts that are waiting to be assembled. So as soon as we get back to work, we'll assemble this bed and ship it. So at any rate, and then here's some other parts for, you know, a cabinet job of some sort and some little tables. And so the process here is it's all hand applied oil and wax finishes. It's really, there's nothing harmful here to the employee. Like I said, one of the things that I promised myself 40 years ago that I was not going to poison myself doing this, and I wasn't going to poison anybody I worked with. And I think I've pretty much kept that promise. So it's all stuff that's really not harmful. It's not toxic. You know, I would say one of the, let's say, tragedies of a lot of manufacturing businesses is the people who are exposed to the dangers, generally speaking, don't understand the danger. And this is, and you can say, well, they can read the safety data sheet. Well, maybe. But, you know, for the most part, you know, the people who run the businesses, they might understand the dangers, but the people who are really exposed to them usually do not. And you can understand where that is.
Yeah. We did have a bunch of questions, actually, since you mentioned it before, speaking of dangerous products, which was about, if you want to give us the quick version of the story of the mattress industry and why you stopped making them.
Okay, so it's a really interesting story about, let's say, our legislative process. We had a loft across the hall, and we made mattresses. Now, mattress making, I have to tell you, isn't exactly rocket science. I mean, what is it? It's some sort of cushioning material inside of a cover, right? So, but we were making a good one. The covers were, now we didn't sew them here. We had a fabricator. We had a subcontractor who made a mattress cover to our specifications. And essentially, though, it was a good one. It was quilted with wool. Wool is a very good quilting material for mattresses because it wicks moisture away from the body. Generally speaking, you won't find wool in any mass market mattresses because it's too expensive. But we made wool quilted mattresses, and the inside of it was latex. Latex is real rubber. It's not polyurethane foam. It's latex is rubber made from the sap from a tree, a rubber tree. And we were pretty early on, and it's a superior product. For a couple different reasons, latex is the superior material for making mattresses as opposed to polyurethane foams. Polyurethane foams, they off-gas toxicity, they don't last very long, they take a compression set, so there's a lot of problems with actually with polyurethane foams, but it's, of course, it's a major component of mass market mattresses. At any rate, we were what's called an independent. Imagine, it's a small company in the Brooklyn Navy Yard making mattresses. And we were making a good mattress, and because we were selling them direct, it was very good value. Well, we weren't the only people doing this. There were a lot of what was known as independents making high-quality mattresses, and in competition with what's known as the S's, the Sealy's, the Servants, the Simmons, and I'm sure there's some others. Certa, yeah. They're all start with S for some reason. At any rate, so some bright guy in Washington got together and said, well, how do we get rid of these independents? And the answer they came up with was testing. So it used to be that your mattress had to pass what was called the cigarette test. And the cigarette test was lining up it was Pall Mall cigarettes were specified, lining up so many Pall Mall cigarettes on the top of a mattress in the quilting seams, and it couldn't char more than an inch. And you could perform this, we did it really right here. I mean, because we knew that our mattress covers weren't going to char. They were quilted with wool, and wool doesn't burn, so it's not going to char. So you perform the test, and you've now, you're certified that your mattress complies with flame testing, or the testing regimen. Okay. So some lobbyists down in DC figured out, okay, well, that's too easy. Anybody can do it. And that's why there are so many independents. What we need to do is have a much more rigorous testing regimen. So they came up with what's called open flame testing. Now, it wasn't good enough just to line up some Pall Mall cigarettes on a mattress cover. You now have to expose the mattress to so many BTUs from a gas burner on the side and the top at the same time for so many seconds. Believe me, you're not doing this in your garage. So what happens? And then you not just have to test one mattress, you have to test 3 mattresses. So now, and the cost of sending this to a lab to have this done is about $1,800 a mattress. So now you're talking about $5,600 to test 3 mattresses, plus the cost of the mattress. And you have to perform the test every time you change a component in the mattress. Well, why? Well, most independents can't do this. It's too expensive. And it was too expensive for us. So we basically threw in the towel. And what we did was we joined together with a company that actually had been a supplier, Berkeley Ergonomics. And they said, okay, well, we'll do it because, that is, if you buy mattresses from us, we can spread the cost over all of us. And of course, that's what we did. But it was successful in driving out a lot of independent producers who couldn't afford the testing regimen. Okay, now, here's the interesting part. So what happened? Well, actually, we passed the test because the only thing that actually Berkeley Ergonomics had to change was the type of thread they were using in order to sew the cover together. They had to start using Kevlar thread rather than polyester thread. Why? Well, the Kevlar thread wouldn't burn in this masking test that polyester thread would. So by changing it to Kevlar thread, they could pass the test because they were quilting with wool, and wool doesn't burn. Wool is a natural fire barrier. But most of the mattress industry, they can't afford to do that. They're quilting with polyester fibers. Okay, let's go into the other room because the compressor is on. So what did the rest of the mass market industry do? Well, they had a big problem. Their mattresses wouldn't pass these open flame tests. So they had to change, and they weren't going to be using wool to quilt with it because the cost of the wool would be more than the cost of their mattress completely. So they're not going to be doing that. So what did they do? Well, they found out they could treat the polyurethane foams and the other materials in the mattress with something called PBDE, polybromated diphenol, okay? Well, what is polybrom? It's a flame retardant that they mixed into the polyurethane mixture, and it made the polyurethane foam fire retardant. Okay, well, PBDE is a very fugitive chemical. If you sleep today on a mass market mattress, and that is one made by, one of the S's, okay, I can guarantee you that you have PBDE in your blood. So what is PBDE? Well, PBDE, polybromated diphenol, is actually very similar chemically to tris. Back in the 1970s, there was a whole scandal in this country because children's wear manufacturers, they were treating children's pajamas with something called tris, which was a flame retardant. And of course, if the pajamas caught on fire, in order to prevent them, if they caught on fire, to sticking to the skin of the child. The problem was tris was carcinogenic. And so essentially, by treating every kid's pajamas with tris, you're basically dousing every child in the country with carcinogens. And my suspicion is this is what's happening with PBDE. So it's the kind of like the unintended consequences of, getting the independent mattress makers out of business is dosing the American public with polybromated diphenol. So that's my mattress story. And that will tell you how things work in Washington.
Yeah. And then we'll share this afterwards. There's a great episode of Frontline on PBS that was about the sleepwear and the mattresses too. So
yeah,
and the impact that it has too, not on firefighters too, who have to enter these environments with all these off-gassing chemicals.
Oh, well, boy, if you go into it, I'm sure you've seen videos of this. That's the problem with things like polyurethanes, is that, once it gets to what's called the flashover temperature, which is, 400 or 500 degrees, the whole room explodes because the whole room is filled with this explosive gas, which has been atomized at 400 degrees or so. And it creates a fireball of a couple thousand degrees. So once now the temperature of the room is a couple thousand degrees, so everything in the room is now instantly flaming.
Regardless of fire retardants.
Yeah, there's a lot of testing videos showing this situation. Yeah. And of course, usually it's the initial fuel is usually the polyurethane foams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Well, Scott, we're just about out of time. If anyone has any last questions before we go, you can drop them into the chat. Okay. But yeah, so we're going to share your website so folks can see all that you have to offer. And like you said before, you ship nationwide, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And someone asked, can you buy furniture now? So like if you place an order now,
Well, it looks down. Somebody bought a bed yesterday. And what we quoted them was, the first week in June. Because, we have orders that is, we have orders that are sitting here on the shop floor. And then there's some others that we have material waiting for. But essentially, our lumber supplier in Pennsylvania, as soon as, the word is that we can come back to work, they'll send us more material. So I think, I don't know, we're looking someplace middle of May. And, so about 4 weeks after that, we could deliver.
Great. So, and some of the things that you make, if folks miss the top of the program, so beds, chairs, tables, wall units.
Basically, wood furniture for the home. In fact, for another episode of this, if you wish, we could do a little special on chair making, because one of the things that we do is, in fact, if you Google chair construction, I think that our website comes up this #1 ranked page on Google on chair construction. So there's we're specialists in that, and we like to think. In fact, I can show you if you got a minute.
Yeah, sure.
So here's a chair frame, and I'm just going to put it up on the bench here just to show you the finer points. So here's a chair frame, and just to show you the finer points, what you want to look for in chair construction is what's called a finger jointed corner block. Now we know from destructive testing that really is the indicator of how long a chair will last. There's a couple things. So these should be mortise and tenon joints, but it should have finger jointed corner blocks. So if your viewers really want to know how do you judge the quality of a chair, turn it over and look for finger jointed corner blocks. Now, truthfully, in this country, not many people actually use them, but we know from testing that that's really the determinant of how long a chair will last. And if you go to our website, I think there's quite a bit of information on how do you build the chair, because obviously the problem in a chair is this, is people tipping it back and forth. A finger jointed corner blocks and full mortise and tenon joints at where the rails meet are really what determines how long it can withstand rocking like that. This chair will go beyond 30,000 iterations of that rock with a 100-kilogram weight on the seat, which is thought to be a lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, amazing. Well, thank you so much. And I want to give a big thanks to Anya as well, who's the hero of today's episode. I'm sure your arms are very tired.
All right. Let me just put her on camera so she can take a bow here. Okay. So take a bow, Anya.
Anya, thank you so much. We so appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Andrew.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Scott. And thanks so much to everybody. So we're going to take you off air, and I just want to say a couple things to our folks before we go. Okay. And I'm going to do this. Okay. Well, thanks so much for joining us, folks. Hopefully you can see me now. Yeah, so that was so great. Sorry we went a couple minutes over, but I want to thank Scott and Anya so much. And I also want to thank Stefan and Doug and Cindy behind the scenes. So we're going to follow up with some links that will have some more information about Scott and their work. But if you want to learn more about furniture making and also about the mattress industry, we'll share some links about that as well. So again, coming up tomorrow, we're going to go back to the Navy Yard. We're going to go and talk to Anastasia, who's one of the founders of Brooklyn Grange, and we're going to talk about building a rooftop farming business. Then Friday, we're going to take the day off for May Day. Then on Saturday, we are going to talk with John Tebow about favorite places to gather and drink and eat in New York City and his amazing artwork. Then we're going to talk about vegan cheese in the afternoon with Riverdale. Then on Sunday, Cindy is going to talk to us about 19th century artwork depicting street vendors in New York City. And then in the afternoon, we're going to talk to Clay Williams, who's really fabulous food photographer. So he's going to talk about that industry. If you're a photographer yourself, or maybe you want to learn some tips about food photography, that'll be a great program. So that's what we have coming up. So thanks so much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow.